They thought framing a black father for a crime he didn't commit would end with a quiet conviction and another forgotten name. But what they didn't expect was his daughter, a 17-year-old girl who turned her father's pain into a revolution. This isn't just a story. It's a reckoning. It was a humid summer night in Atlanta when Marcus Hill's life changed forever. The sound of sirens sliced through the still air, followed by pounding on the door that shook the whole house. Marcus, a 42-year-old mechanic known in his neighborhood for fixing cars for free when people couldn't afford repairs, was sitting at the kitchen table grading his daughter's scholarship essay. The knocking turned into shouting, "Police! Open up!" His wife, Tamara, barely had time to grab their daughter Leona before the door splintered open. Flashlights flooded the living room, boots stomping across the floor, and guns pointing at Marcus like he was public enemy number one. The officers yelled for him to get on the ground, faces hard, hands trembling with adrenaline. Marcus froze, confused. He had no record, no warrants, no clue why half the precinct was in his living room. Before he could speak, one officer slammed him to the floor, twisted his arm, and snapped on the cuffs. Tamara screamed. Leona cried out for her dad. But within minutes, Marcus was dragged into a cruiser, barefoot, shirt ripped, his face pressed against the cold metal door. The flashing lights faded as Tamara collapsed in the doorway, her daughter clinging to her leg, both of them watching the man who held their world together disappear into the night. At the station, Marcus was accused of armed robbery and assault, charges that could carry 20 years. The evidence? A grainy security video showing a black man in a hoodie robbing a convenience store. The suspect's height and build were a close match, according to Detective Brian Malloy, the lead investigator. Marcus pleaded that he was home all evening with his family, that he didn't even own a hoodie, but his words were drowned out by the mechanical click of a camera taking his mugshot. Within hours, the local news stations plastered his face on every screen. Local mechanic arrested in violent robbery. Overnight, Marcus went from community hero to criminal. But what made it worse was the quiet satisfaction behind Malloy's smirk. It wasn't just about solving a case, it was about power. And in his world, black men were guilty until proven otherwise. The story spread faster than truth ever could. The shop where Marcus worked locked its doors. Old customers stopped calling. Reporters camped outside the Hill home, asking Tamara if she had any idea about her husband's double life. Neighbors whispered. Even the pastor hesitated to call. For Leona, high school became a war zone of whispers and side eyes. One boy muttered, "Guess the apple doesn't fall far." Another posted her father's mugshot on social media with the caption, "Another thug off the streets." But Leona wasn't like other kids. She was her father's daughter, the one he'd raised on principles of courage and faith. And as she watched her mother crumble under the weight of rumors, something fierce ignited inside her. She would not let them destroy her father. She would not let another black man be buried alive by lies. The trial came fast, too fast. Public defender overworked, judge impatient, jury disinterested. The prosecution painted Marcus as a desperate man with money troubles, conveniently ignoring the stack of community service certificates and letters from neighbors who swore by his character. The video evidence was shaky, but the detective's testimony sealed it. "I'm confident we got the right man," Malloy declared, his voice steady, his uniform polished. The judge nodded. And just like that, truth is lost to perception. Marcus Hill was sentenced to 18 years in Fulton County Correctional. Leona's world shattered. She remembered clutching her father's hand through the courtroom bars, tears streaking her face as he whispered, "Don't let them turn you bitter, baby. Let this make you stronger." But bitterness was hard to avoid when every door slammed in her face. Her college counselor quietly paused her scholarship recommendation. The landlord began talking about reassessing the lease. Racism wasn't always shouted. Sometimes it was written in polite letters and delivered with fake smiles. Still, Leona refused to disappear. She started digging, visiting the store where the robbery happened, pulling security footage and documenting everything on an old phone. Her mother begged her to stop. "You'll get hurt, Leona," Tamara warned. "They don't like girls asking questions." But Leona's response was simple. Then they picked the wrong girl to silence. Weeks turned into months. Late one night, while replaying the footage frame by frame, Leona noticed something. A tattoo on the suspect's wrist, visible for less than a second as the man reached for the counter. Her father didn't have tattoos. She paused, zoomed in, heart pounding. It was a serpent wrapped around a cross, a design she recognized from the neighborhood gang called the Cross Vipers. They were known for petty robberies, but one of their members, Ricky Blade Monroe, had recently bragged online about teaching the cops a lesson. Leona cross-checked his social post with the robbery date. He deleted most of them, but one old tag remained, the same night, same time. That was her proof. That was her father's freedom. Leona brought the evidence to the police station. They laughed her out of the lobby. "You think we missed something, kid?" Malloy sneered. "Leave the detective work to the grown-ups." But the truth didn't need permission. Leona uploaded the comparison footage online with the caption, "They locked up my dad. But here's who really did it." Within hours it exploded. Millions of views, hashtags like #FreeMarcusHill and #JusticeForTheInnocent trending nationwide. News outlets picked it up. Influencers amplified it. For the first time the narrative wasn't in their hands, it was in hers. Malloy and the department scrambled to contain the fallout, calling it online misinformation. But public pressure was relentless. Activists organized rallies. Churches opened their doors. Even former cops stepped forward, anonymously admitting that evidence had been lost or redirected under Malloy's watch. The district attorney's office finally reopened the case. And when Ricky Monroe was brought in for questioning, it didn't take long before the cracks appeared. Faced with mounting evidence and the promise of a plea deal, he confessed. Marcus Hill had been framed to close the case quickly, just another black suspect who fit the bill. The revelation hit the nation like a thunderclap. Marcus's conviction was overturned. He walked out of prison after 427 days, the same number Leona had marked with tally lines across her bedroom wall. The reunion was televised, father and daughter locked in an embrace that silenced even the loudest cynics. But while the camera saw joy, what burned inside Marcus was rage, not the reckless kind but the righteous kind that builds movements. Marcus didn't just walk free. He walked determined. He launched the Hill Truth Project, a foundation to expose wrongful convictions and fight racial bias in law enforcement. Leona became its digital voice, her videos blending storytelling, facts, and emotion. "Every statistic," she said in one viral clip, "has a name. And every name had a family who believed in justice until the system told them not to." The foundation grew. Journalists joined. Law students volunteered. Within a year they had freed 3 more men and women from false imprisonment. Their story became a symbol, proof that truth can rise even from the cracks of a broken system. But Malloy wasn't done. He called it a witch hunt, accusing Marcus of undermining law enforcement. He filed defamation suits, appeared on talk shows, painting himself as the victim of cancel culture. Yet one leaked email destroyed his charade, a thread between him and the prosecutor's office proving deliberate suppression of evidence. The scandal rocked the department. Malloy was forced to resign, stripped of pension, and later indicted for corruption. The very system that once backed him now turned its back. Justice, slow but steady, had arrived. Leona stood on the courthouse steps the day of his sentencing, cameras flashing. Her voice, steady and mature beyond her years, echoed through the crowd. "They tried to bury my father, but they forgot we are the seeds." That clip alone got 30 million views in 2 days. It wasn't just a quote, it became a movement. Schools printed it on banners. Marchers chanted it at protests. Leona had become more than a daughter fighting for her dad. She was the face of a generation demanding equity, accountability, and change. 2 years later, Atlanta unveiled the Marcus Hill Justice Center, a public legal aid clinic funded by donations from across the country. On opening day, Marcus stood beside Leona and Tamara, tears shining in his eyes. "I lost a year of my life," he said, "but I gained something greater, proof that truth, once awakened, doesn't sleep again." Behind him, murals painted by local artists showed faces of other victims of racial injustice: Breonna, George, Trayvon. Each name a reminder that history doesn't forget, it just waits for voices brave enough to speak it. As the ceremony ended, Leona looked at the crowd: reporters, students, mothers holding photos of loved ones lost to bias and brutality. She took the mic. "This isn't just about my dad. It's about every father, mother, son, and daughter who deserves to come home safe. We can't change the past, but we can make sure the future knows their names." Applause thundered, but what mattered most was what came after, the quiet promises whispered in that crowd. "We'll keep fighting. We'll keep telling the stories. We'll keep rising." The year after the Marcus Hill Justice Center opened, the movement had grown far beyond Atlanta. Across the country, cities lit up with rallies, workshops, and town halls under one banner: "Truth doesn't break." But not everyone wanted to hear that truth. For every voice raised in solidarity, another tried to shout it down. Commentators on certain networks mocked the movement as reverse racism. Anonymous groups plastered hateful flyers on campus walls. A local radio host went viral for saying, maybe if they just followed the rules they wouldn't get arrested. The divide was growing, and Marcus knew the next battle wouldn't be in a courtroom, it would be in the hearts of the people. The turning point came one afternoon during a community forum at a downtown civic center. The Hill Truth Project had organized it as a dialogue between citizens and law enforcement, a chance to build understanding. But the moment Marcus and Leona walked on stage, the atmosphere shifted. Outside, hundreds of supporters waved banners reading "Justice for All" and "End Racial Profiling." Across the street, a smaller but loud group held Confederate flags and signs that read, "Protect Our Police." Cameras rolled. The air pulsed with tension. Inside, the crowd was a blend of hope and hostility, and the line between them was thin as a razor. Marcus took the mic. "We're not here to divide," he said calmly, his deep voice steady despite the jeers from the back. "We're here to demand fairness. Equal rights don't mean fewer rights for anyone else." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Then a man in a baseball cap stood, veins bulging in his neck. "You calling me racist because I back the blue?" he shouted. "My family's been cops for 3 generations. Marcus looked him straight in the eye. "No, sir. I'm calling the system broken when it protects wrong over right. You love the badge? Then help fix what dishonors it." The room fell silent. Even those who came to heckle felt the weight of his words. Outside, however, the tension boiled over. A protester on the opposing side threw a plastic bottle into the crowd. In seconds, chants turned to shouts, shouts turned to chaos. Police moved in, trying to separate the groups, but the surge was overwhelming. Leona rushed outside just as someone shouted a slur at one of the young black activists holding a sign that said, "My skin isn't a probable cause." The activist, trembling with anger, shouted back. Another shove. Then a wall of officers formed between them, their batons raised. Leona stepped forward, voice breaking through the noise. "Stop. This is what they want, to turn us against each other." Her voice carried through megaphones and cell phone cameras. The fighting paused, breaths heavy, faces twisted with emotion. "We're not enemies," she cried. "We're neighbors. We're families. Look at what hate costs us." In that frozen moment, an older white woman from the opposing side stepped forward, tears in her eyes. She wore a faded t-shirt that said "Blue Lives Matter," but she held out her hand to Leona. "My son's a cop," she said softly, "but he told me what they did to your father was wrong." The crowd's roar dimmed. People began lowering their signs. What had started as confrontation began transforming into conversation. Reporters captured the image. Leona Hill, 18 years old, standing hand in hand with the woman once shouting against her. That photo went viral overnight, symbolizing the movement's power to rise above hate. Still, not everyone wanted peace. The next morning, the Justice Center was vandalized. Windows shattered, slurs spray painted across the walls. Marcus arrived before dawn to clean it himself. As he scrubbed the graffiti, neighbors began showing up silently one by one, black, white, Latino, Asian, all carrying buckets, brushes, and paint. By noon, hundreds filled the block, covering the hate with murals of unity. On one wall, a young artist painted 2 hands, one dark, one light, intertwined around broken chains. Marcus watched, eyes moist. "They can break windows," he said softly, "but they can't break faith." A week later, the governor announced a state hearing to review racial bias in policing, something unheard of before the Hill case. Marcus and Leona were invited to testify. The chamber was packed. Lawmakers, police chiefs, journalists, and families of victims. Some clapped when they entered. Others crossed their arms, skeptical. Marcus spoke first, telling his story not as a victim but as a man who believed in rebuilding. "You can't heal what you won't admit is broken," he said. "Accountability isn't anti-police. It's pro-justice. We're not asking for revenge. We're asking for repairs." When Leona took the stand, her voice trembled at first, then steadied with each word. "I'm not here to blame every white person, every officer, or every system. I'm here to remind you that silence is a choice. My father lost a year of his life because people were silent when it mattered most. Don't be silent now." The entire room stood in applause, some reluctant, some tearful, all moved. That day marked a shift. The Marcus Hill bill, designed to mandate independent review boards for police misconduct, passed with bipartisan support. For the first time, a reform born out of injustice gained national traction. Reporters called it the New Awakening. But Marcus just smiled. "We're not awake yet," he told Leona. "We're just opening our eyes." Months later, the Hill family hosted a peace march through downtown Atlanta. Over 50,000 people joined: students, veterans, police officers, parents, and children of every color. Some carried signs quoting Leona's words, "They tried to bury us, but we are the seeds." Others held candles for the ones who never got justice. Helicopters hovered overhead as Marcus led the crowd across the bridge where his father once marched during the civil rights era. He stopped midway, raised his hands, and said, "We are not here to fight flesh and blood, we're here to fight the lie that one life matters more than another." The chant began quietly, then roared from every throat, "Truth! Don't break." By nightfall, news outlets declared it one of the largest peaceful demonstrations in Georgia's history. The same networks that once portrayed Marcus as a criminal now called him a reformer. The same officers who had dragged him from his home now walked beside him. And Leona, once mocked by classmates, was now a nominee for the National Youth Peace Prize. Standing under the streetlights, surrounded by chants, tears, and hope, she whispered to her father, "You told me not to let this make me bitter." Marcus smiled, wrapping his arm around her. "And you didn't, baby. You made it better." That night, footage from the march flooded social media. Strangers wrote messages of unity, forgiveness, and courage. Even some of the loudest critics from the early days posted apologies, acknowledging how wrong they had been. The fight between races hadn't vanished, but something greater had begun: the slow rebuilding of trust, one story, one truth, one heart at a time. And as the credits of this chapter in history rolled, a familiar voice echoed the message that started it all. They thought they could silence one black man's truth, but they awakened a movement that refused to bow. And that's the story of Marcus Hill, a man they tried to silence and the daughter who made sure the world heard him. If you believe truth can rise even when buried under lies, if you believe justice isn't a privilege but a right, then help us keep these stories alive. Hit that like button, share this story, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us reach 5,000 subscribers and tell more untold stories of strength, hope, and resistance. Because silence protects the system, but your voice? It breaks it.